Welcome to my third video. This is looking over the engineering console in the TSN Sandbox. The engineering console has got three sub-consoles. It has ship systems, main engineering, and system management. I'll just go over each one in a basic capacity just to show you how each console works. This is the ship systems console, sub-console. You can see that it's got various bits of information for you as an engineer. In the top right hand corner, just like many other consoles, it has your ship status panel. So it gives you all that key information about your ship status. And then there's some new things on this console that you might not be familiar with. So top left is a hull integrity readout. Here it says 100%. That means there is no damage whatsoever on your hull, including systems damage. And then below I've got a data readout of each system that's available on your ship. So there's the ordnance loader and beam array. Those are part of your weapon system. So as your weapon systems take damage, those individual things will take damage. Your ordnance loader damage will affect the speed that your torpedoes load at. So at 0 damage, they won't load at all. At 50% damage, the speed will be slowed. The same with the beam array, but that affects your firing rate of your primary beams. So it's specifically tied to the firing rate rather than the firing strength. So as that lowers, the firing rate will also decrease. Below that are your three engine systems, your warp drive, impulse, and maneuver. Each one will just lower the rate at that you can travel or turn. So warp drive and impulse drive will lower the speed that you're traveling at. Maneuver will lower the speed that your ship is able to roll, pitch, yaw, and reposition itself. The shield emitters are to do with your shield strength. So as those go offline, it lowers the capacity for your shields to be able to recharge. And then your sensor array obviously lowers the distance that you things. In the middle is your ship shadow that shows all of the grid and where those systems are placed. This is all that's displayed on this engineering screen. The great thing about this is you can hover over and you can see what each system is and where that's located. Different ships have different locations for these systems. You can also see how many there are. So for example, I've got beam array 1, beam array 3, beam array 4, and beam array 2. So there are 4 beam arrays on this ship. It means that each one is worth about 25% in damage. So every one that's damaged will lower it by 25%. Some of the systems only have 2. So for example, I think shield systems have shield emitter 1 and 2. That's all you've got on this ship. Other ships might have more, other ships might have fewer. It depends on what ship you're on. The cool thing about this engineering grid is that you can click and drag, and you can use your mouse wheel to zoom in as well. So if you need a clearer picture of what's going on, you can zoom in and then you can zoom out. If you ever get lost, for example, you don't know where your engineering screen's gone, in the bottom right hand corner is a recenter button. So you can click on that and it will just recenter that display. On the right hand side is a filtered list of all your systems. So you can see at the top there's the 4 main system types. By clicking on those, you can filter out those systems. They'll disappear from the grid and they'll also disappear from the list. So if you want to look specifically at the engine systems and where they are, you can click on that. You can see all of the engine systems associated with the engines, impulse drive, maneuver, and warp drive, and where they're located on the ship. The same with the sensor systems, same with the shield systems, and the same with the weapons. So you can see each part of your ship individually instead of having to see it all together. You can also scroll through this list, see each of them, and you can select each one of them. At the moment, that doesn't do anything, but in the future, it will give you some kind of status readout on the left-hand side underneath that data. For now, it's just a list to be able to view and sort through. Okay, I'm going to come back to this screen later to look at damage control and how damage control teams work, but I'm going to move on to the main engineering first. You'll notice on this screen there aren't any power sliders or heat sliders. That's because that's part of the main engineering screen. This has got several different components. Top right, you've got your normal ship status, but then in the bottom right, I've given an additional readout of your hull so that you can see that damage, if there's any damage accumulating or if there's any systems that have gone offline, it just gives you that little bit more situational awareness. It works exactly the same way as the one on the ship system, so you can zoom in and out to see that damage a bit closer. which is particularly useful because it's a smaller display. You can also recenter the display as well, and you can adjust it as and when you need. The main part of this console are your heat and your power sliders. So the heat sliders are at the bottom and the power sliders are above. For clarity, it just gives the best arrangement to be able to see everything without lines overlapping. For each heat reservoir, you have a couple of power sliders connected. These are indicated by the lines going into the power sliders that it's connected to. So you can see the weapons heat is connected to beams and torpedoes. Engine heat connected by the green line to impulse, warp, and maneuver. Sensors is connected directly just to the sensors, and then shields is connected to your forward and rear shields. To add more coolant to keep the heat down in a system, you can click specifically on the box. You have a maximum of 8 coolant across all the 4 systems. So you need to manage where that coolant goes. You can increase or decrease, and as you obviously increase and decrease, more coolant becomes available for other systems. Light green shows that that coolant's allocated. Grey shows that there's no coolant that can go into those systems, and dark green means that you've got coolant available that could be directed to that system. To clear out the coolant in one, you can press the grey buttons at the bottom. That will clear out the coolant in each system. You can also use a hotkey. I think it's space off the top of my head, but you can configure those hotkeys. The sliders at the top for each system can be clicked and dragged to increase the power to each system, and that then has an impact on the system. It usually increases the speed that something's happening. So like the speed that your beams are firing or the speed that your torpedoes are loading. You can see the heat building up now in my weapon systems, so I'd need to add coolant to stabilize that and keep that heat from building too quickly. With that coolant in, that heat's going to come down as well. Above your power sliders, top left, you've got a hull integrity readout for a quick reference again, saying it's 100%, that there's no damage there. You've also got an E level, which is an emissions level. This is something that's going to come later, where if your emissions are higher, enemy ships will be able to see you from a further distance. But if your emissions are lower, you're going to silent running and you'll be able to keep away from being detected by enemies. In the middle at the top is the final part to look at, which links with systems management. This is your config menu. So these are different configurations that you can set up that are presets. So you can see I've got 3 presets set up here: beam combat, max recharge, and silent running. To access them, I can click on it. It will set the required power settings that I've asked it to set. And then I can cycle through different ones. The max recharge I've not configured, so I'll come back to that when I come to the system management. You can see how they automatically add in coolant and change the power sliders for you. These can also be linked to a hotkey. They don't have to be in this config menu. You could have them just as a hotkey separate. Really, you'd use this to put configurations that you don't have a hotkey assigned to, that you might use once or twice every so often, whereas the ones that you use commonly, you wouldn't have in this config menu list, you'd have just on a hotkey. The final page we're going to look at is the system management page, which is this one here. So there's a couple of different things on here. The main element of it is being able to set and reconfigure your different power settings, so that you can use them with hotkeys or by putting them in that config menu from the main engineering that we looked at earlier. There's also another area on the right hand side that has specific systems that affect the functioning of the ship. The AMC is to do with like crafting and manufacturing. Life support is to do with how quickly your DAMCON teams are able to move around the ship. If you take life support off and artificial gravity, for example, your DAMCON teams are affected in how they perform their tasks on the ship. Targeting array, if you take that offline, it means that the weapons officer can no longer target anything. So to activate and deactivate them, you just simply click on them. They turn red to show that they are no longer online. And you also get this green icon light up next to them. That means that you can actually remove the system from the ship entirely and it goes into your cargo hold. So if you click on this one, it will take it out of the ship, it'll put it in your cargo hold, and now it's no longer accessible at all. So you can see the AMC has gone grey. You can replace it, for example, with a different one, and activate it there, and then reactivate it. So it's like an activate and uninstall, reinstall and activate system. The next major part is your power configurations. On the left, you can see I've got 3 power configurations set up. These are the same ones that appeared in the config menu. And then there is a bar at the bottom and a create button next to it. I'm going to go through it step by step about how to go through and create a power configuration. So if I want to create a new power configuration, I click in this box here and I can type in a name. For example, I could type in the name Combat Maneuver. I'm just going to shorten it to Combat Man. And then I can click Create. Once I've clicked Create, you can see it appears in my menu in the top left and it's highlighted green. And below are the power coolant sliders and a hotkey. To set my power sliders, I can just click and drag them to my desired power settings. So for example, as combat maneuver, I want to put my maneuver high. I want to keep my beams high. I'm not too worried about my torpedoes, so I'm going to keep that at about 100%. If you can't get it quite there, I can click the reset at the bottom. I want my impulse a little bit higher. I'm not too worried about my warp setting, sensors, forward shields. I probably want to increase as well. So those will now set the power sliders. Next to it are the coolant values. I can drop them back down to 0 by clicking reset. And then I can think, right, I need a coolant in shields, a couple of coolant in weapons, and some coolant in... You can't allocate more than 8 coolant. So for example here, shields is 2, weapons is 2, and engines is 4. If I try and allocate more, it just resets that slider. You have to bring the slider back down and allocate more. Need it. Finally, I can look at the hotkeys on the right hand side. You can scroll through the different hotkeys available. There's a lot more available than there used to be. So for example, those are my number pad keys. There's all the letter keys, and there's the normal number keys on the top row of your keyboard. This I want to set as key 1. So I can click that and you can see it now says combat maneuver key 1 on there. And then just to save that setting, I'm going to click update and then it will close that menu and then my combat maneuver is saved. If I want to edit a setting or delete a setting, there's a couple of things that I can do. So to delete, I click on this red button here and it will remove that from my setting. So for example, I don't want the silent running setting, so I'm just going to click and delete that. It removes it from the power config list. It also removes it from the stored list that I've got on my computer as well. To edit, for example, I want this max recharge rate to have a hotkey and I need to tweak some of the settings. You just click on the setting, it turns green and it shows you the power settings already set. For example, if I click on combat and maneuver, there's the power settings, there's the name, and there's a hotkey that I assigned earlier. Click on max recharge, you saw earlier that it was just all set at 100%. So I'm going to bring back a few of these systems because I want it to be working on recharging my ship. Don't need to worry about any coolant. And I'm not going to set a hotkey, I'm going to keep it unassigned. And I'm just going to click update. So that now updates my max recharge. If I select that again, you can see those are my updated settings. If I want to rename it, I can delete and I can edit. So I just want to call it recharge and update there, and it'll update the name as well. And then the final part, if I want it to be displayed in the config menu on my main engineering, I need to have this selected. You can see it's a line with a couple of menu icons left and right. If you deselect that, it doesn't appear in the config menu. If you have that selected, it will appear in the config menu. So Beam Combat, I don't need in the config menu because I've got a hotkey assigned to it. So I'm going to deselect that. When I go back to my main engineering page, I've only got the recharge in there. Go back to my system management page. I want Combat Maneuver and Beam Combat back in there. Select those two, go back to main engineering, and you're in there as well. Okay, looking back at damage control, you can see my ship here is taking some damage from combat. My hull integrity in the top left is reading at 77%, so I know that I've taken some damage against my hull and against systems. On the top right, my ship status, you can see that the weapons has turned yellow as well, and the engines have gone down a little bit. It indicates just very quickly that I've taken some damage to those two systems. The engineering screen obviously provides you with a lot more data. So on the left, I've got my data panel, the weapons, ordnance loader and beam array, they've taken some damage, and my impulse drive has taken some damage. Everything else is working at 100%. On the screen, my grid, whole grid, you can see the small red dots. Those indicate damage, and where a system has turned red, that indicates that that system node is damaged. Well, I've got some damage to my rear, and I've got damage to the front and the port of my ship. The damage can be filtered out, so you can switch that off just so that you can focus on the individual systems, so you can pick them out if you need to, or you can switch it back on and switch everything else off, so you just focus on the whole damage. You'll notice there's no DAMCON teams currently active on the grid. That's because I need to talk to the operations officer and request that they send some DAM control teams to be able to start repairing this damage. Once they've been sent, it's up to me to organize those teams. So my operations officer will be looking at the damage control team and be telling it to activate, which means send it to the grid. Once it's active, it's going to appear on my grid. So there's my DAM control team. It's signified by this blue icon, and it says it's reporting in. Now, if I select that DAM control team, the data on the left changes. You can see a readout of the team itself. So the team leader is Warrant Officer R. Jordan, and then a health status of that damage control team. There are 8 members in that team. All of them are okay. None of them are lightly wounded, none of them are seriously wounded, and none of them have been killed. If any are lightly wounded or seriously wounded, I need to send them back to the medical bay to be healed. I'd have to send the whole team there together instead of just those individuals. If any are killed, I need to send them to medical bay, and those killed will be taken by the medical team. The DAMCON team then will be reduced in how many members are okay. And as you take light wounds and serious wounds, it reduces the speed and effectiveness of that team. So they'll repair systems more slowly, and they'll remove a little bit more slowly as well. On the bottom left, you'll also see an orders panel for that team. The top part is mainly to send the team to different areas of the ship. So for example, there's reporting to the medical bay, which will send it back to my operations officer, put them in the medical bay. Report to the shuttle bay, again it will go back to my operations officer, but it'll also be available in the shuttle bay for any shuttle pilots to load up that team to be able to transport. Report to crew quarters. This is just an area for them to reside in when they're not doing anything else. There's report to guest quarters and report to the brig. Those 2 areas are mainly for roleplay, but they're again the 2 areas that the operations officer can see and can manage. Below that, you've got auto repair and manual repair. The team's currently in manual repair, so to get them to repair any system, I have to select that team, and I have to select the destination that I want them to move to, and they'll repair all of the nodes as they move through them. They won't deliberately go away and track different nodes to repair, but you can see as they move to each node, they fix it, and then they move on. If I want them to do that on their own, I can put them in auto repair. The damage control team will then make their way to the nearest damaged node. So once they've finished, if I click auto repair, they'll tell me that they're responding to damage close by, and they'll just start moving of their own accord, and gradually they'll repair the ship on their own. Once they've finished repairing the ship, they'll just stay where they are. To switch back to manual repair, I just click manual repair. They tell me that they will wait for my orders, and then I can direct them again. Depending on where the team is deployed from in the ship will depend on where it appears on your grid as well. So for example, I've got a DAMCON team that the operations officer has in the shuttle bay. Maybe it's been transported over from a station via shuttle. And then if I activate that team, it will actually appear in a different location in the ship. So in the top here, Chief Petty Officer Palmer has been deployed from the crew quarters, but this DAMCON team here, Chief Warrant Officer Simmons, has been deployed from the shuttle bay as well. Again, the medical bay will be a different location, guest quarters a different one, and the brig a different location as well. Each DAMCON team can be put on auto repair on its own. So, for example, I can have that team on auto repair, but I can have this team on manual repair and have them move around and just decide how best I want them to be deployed. As the damage is repaired, the hull integrity will increase. And if you want to see the actual damage readout again, select the team and it will deselect it, or click on the team and it will deselect it, and you get that data readout again so you can see what's going on. So that's everything about engineering and all the different consoles. It's a bit more complex than the other consoles, so it's taking a little bit longer. I hope it was interesting, and thanks for watching.